Exactly. So I think that leads to the imposter syndrome where people go, "Ooh, what if they find out I don't know every last thing about this? What if they find that out? I can pretty much guess you don't. I don't care who it is standing on stage. I can pretty much assume they don't know every last thing about that subject. And I just go by Einstein. Don't take it from me, take it from Albert Einstein, who said, "Why remember anything that you can look up in a book?"
Hello and welcome to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. We're here to help you navigate life while disrupting the status quo. Our discussions cover a number of topics relevant to everyday life. We discuss everything from relationships to entrepreneurship. We also engage in some difficult but important conversations. And now, here are your hosts, Brian and Tanya Hamilton.
Welcome to another episode of the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that is often a difficult one for people. We're going to be talking about public speaking. And our guest to talk to us about public speaking is none other than Peter George. Peter, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. We appreciate the kind words. We're glad to have you on. And we're going to start by just getting to know you a little bit. So who is Peter George?
Who is Peter George? Well, I'm a public speaking coach. I've been helping others become more effective at speaking, whether that's professional or aspiring speakers, executives, attorneys, and the like. Been doing that for about 17 years. Been speaking on stage for about 35. So I've been doing it quite a while, a little more than half my life. But getting here was kind of odd. I grew up with a lisp and a stutter. So the last thing I ever wanted to do was communicate with people. Never wanted to open my mouth and really didn't in many situations, including school. But when I got older and the lisp and the stutter started to subside, I still really didn't communicate a lot. But once I got into the business world, I realized the value of communicating with others. Of course, there was the need, but then there was a value. There was a benefit if you became good at it. Problem was, I wasn't good at it. So and this will age me as well as the 35 years of speaking, I listened to a lot of cassettes, read a lot of books, and that was awesome. And it helped a lot, but it still didn't get me where I wanted to go. So then I went and got help, first in a group atmosphere, and then one-on-one with someone. And that made quite a difference. And what I realized was the more I spoke in public, the more I represented my company in public, the faster and higher the revenue was for my company. And that's where I saw the benefit. And that's where I try to help other people, whether it's for their business or if they want to make a business out of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So what was it that made you really recognize the value in speaking and made you pursue improving at that?
It was literally the revenue. I had a publishing company. I started a publishing company back in 1990, not knowing the first thing about it, and grew it to be the leader in its field, in its niche. And we sold that company 15 years later. But when I went out and spoke at a large event that I was invited to speak at, and it was one of the first times I ever spoke, actually, I saw the increase in revenue. And I thought, I don't have a financial degree, but it doesn't take long to see that one helped the other. And then the next time I spoke in public in front of a large group, you saw the same type of bump. I'm like, well, I think I'm onto something here. Little did I know, many people know that and knew that. I didn't, however, that there would be that correlation. Once I learned it, it was like, this is pretty cool. How often can I speak?
And you know what? That's interesting, right? Because I'm thinking back to, first presentations in school, right? And there's like some kids who are terrified and some kids who will just go up and do it. And who are the ones who get the better mark? Usually the ones who just go up and, don't just talk and get all their points out and away you go, right? Those are the ones who get the A's and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's something that we will always have to do, even if we're not in work environment that calls for it. I think it's definitely a skill to have, but it's when it doesn't come naturally, how to build that skill.
It doesn't come naturally for anybody.
Okay.
Well, you got to take that with a grain of salt. There's always the person. It's just like the 3-year-old who sits down at the piano and plays Mozart.
Yep.
Sometimes that's just the way things happen in life. But for most of us, the vast, vast majority of us, it doesn't come naturally for anyone. We might have seen someone that influenced growing up, whether it's a parent, teacher, someone else. We might have gotten trained for it. But to be natural, and a lot of people, well, I have the gift for gab. Well, cool. You speak a lot. You talk a lot. That doesn't mean that people are listening. That doesn't mean that it's resonating with people. You know, it's funny that I hear people every once in a while say, I'll give you an exact example, actually. I was at a conference at the networking part of it, and I was getting a cup of coffee. It was early in the morning. And the guy comes up and he takes a look at my name badge, and he never saw this guy before in my life, and he says, I don't need you. I said, excuse me? I don't need you. Like, well, you got me at a loss. And he said, well, I've got the guts to get up and speak, and I know what I want to say, so I don't need you. And I'm thinking, all I'm trying to do is get a cup of coffee and find a seat. I'm like, well, cool. I'm sure you're an awesome speaker. And that was that. But I joke around with people sometimes when they say things like that. And I say, the Japanese have a word for when you know what you want to say and you have the guts to get up in front of people and do it. Do you happen to know what that word is?
I don't.
Karaoke. And how good is that? Unless your audience has had 3 beers and a shot, you stink. So for most of us anyway, like me, I wouldn't be able to carry a tune. So there's a difference between talking and speaking so people willingly open their hearts, souls, and minds to what you're saying, and you provide a benefit to them.
Mm.
And that's the key, providing a benefit for them.
That makes so much sense, right? It's so true because you want, and sometimes it's not even how long you speak, right? It's
Right.
what you say in that time, that what you're saying that's going to benefit, resonate. Now, what do you think about vocabulary? And I guess the reason why I asked that is Brian's like big on, I don't know if you've done it recently, but like learning a new word every day, right? And, trying to, and then like, adding it to your vocabulary throughout the day, right? So it sticks. So what are your thoughts on that? Like just vocabulary even?
Brian, what you're doing, I think, is a great thing to keep your mind sharp. But is it necessary? No, I have a very small, because I didn't speak a lot when I was young, I have a very small vocabulary. I do not use 5-syllable words. And if you ever want to hear me stutter again, ask me to say a 5-syllable word and I'll be stuttering all over it. But simple is better. Simple doesn't make us work. It's not that the other people in the audience, and I'm working with a scientist right now who is saying, but I'm speaking only to other scientists. And I said, well, do those other scientists, however, have other things on their mind? Well, yeah, they might have personal things. They might have work-related things on their mind. Keep it simple. And if you look at most top newspapers, they're written at a 5th grade level.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because we're not intelligent. It's because we don't want to have to read the paragraphs over and over again while we're getting disrupted and hear noises or whatever, wherever our mind's going. Just keeping it simple. Keeping it simple is really good. If you look at the great talks in history, Winston Churchill, Martin Luther King, John Kennedy, Steve Jobs, these great speakers, simple words. And you're right, Tanya, it doesn't have to be long.
Mm-hmm.
Gettysburg Address, 272 words. The guy who spoke before him for 2 hours, before the president spoke for 2 hours, no one knows what it's about. Nor does anybody care.
Yeah.
And if you like history, President Lincoln thought that was a failure of a talk. because it was only a few minutes after someone else's 2-hour talk. He said to his aide later, this will go down in history as one of the worst presidential addresses ever. Kind of did just the opposite.
Yeah, and I mean it's the attention span too, right? So especially in today's day, like many people, doesn't matter how smart you are, whatever your job is, right? We have so many things going on in our mind, the to-do list where we got to pick the kids up, that it's probably that time is really key. So like for you, when you're, I don't know, doing conferences or you're listening to other people, like, is there a magic number as to how long these things should be?
What's becoming very common now is like 20 minutes, and that's a lot because of TED Talks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you get a fascinating speaker who will speak for an hour, people will stay attentive.
Yeah.
And that speaker knows how to do that. Our attention span adjusts up to about 8 minutes. So if every 8 minutes you switch something up, when I'm training, if I'm at a conference and I'm training adults, about the 7 or 8 minute mark, I drop something, quote unquote, by accident to make a noise and just disrupt it. Yeah, it's great for the name of your podcast, right? Disrupt. So, and if you do that, that snaps people back. So a speaker who really knows what he or she's doing, they can speak for an hour or more and still keep people incredibly engaged. Most people anyway. But I look at it this way. I agree. Our attention spans, for the most part, are very short today, and probably always have been. We just talk about it more. But think about the people who say, my wife and I sat down and binged Game of Thrones for 10 hours on Saturday. That's quite an attention span. When we're involved, we pay attention. The key is for the speaker to get us involved and keep us involved. And there's a way to do that. Quit thinking about ourselves. Think of the people who are nervous about public speaking. By the way, most people are. But what if I screw up? What if I don't engage them? What if they don't like me? What if I forget what I'm going to say? What if I? We're putting all that weight on ourselves and all that focus on ourselves, when the spotlight should be on the audience, engaging them, keeping them attentive, giving them what they want and need to know, giving them a takeaway that'll benefit them when they leave the room. When you do that, that takes a lot of weight off our shoulders. All we're doing now is being of service to them and helping them. And that's not all that difficult.
Yeah, and people will listen if you are offering, being of service and offering suggestions, solutions to, the problems that they have.
Exactly. We just too often make it about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's make it about you for a second here. I want to circle back to how you got started, because you said you gave your first speech, you saw the correlation with the revenue, and decided that this is something you wanted to improve in. Now, I'll assume that first speech wasn't as polished as you are today. So what did you do?
Very good assumption.
What did you do to improve that skill to the point where you're now a speaking coach?
A lot of practicing, a lot of asking for critiques. And I was fortunate. My wife owns her own business as well. So when she could, she would come to my speaking engagements and I'd ask her. And like a lot of wives or spouses or significant others, she was both very comforting, like, oh, you could do this a little better. Sometimes it was like, yeah, that wasn't your best, and here's why. And so she was helpful, but I've always had mentors. I videotape myself quite often and go back and look at those. And I quite often try new techniques when I hear them. So it's a lot of trial and error, just like most things are in life when we're trying to get better at them. And then when we get up there, and if we're trying to not fail as opposed to serve the audience, well, it might not be as engaging as you had hoped.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to, or anybody who's a part of this conversation right now, if we're to start to make those first steps to improve as a public speaker, what would you say is a good first step to start off with?
First one we already touched upon, make it about the audience. It's not about you. Just isn't. The other is breathe. People think, well, that's simple. Well, most of the time we breathe with just about a third of our lung capacity. I always ask people, you ever in a car and the artist is singing along and you run out of breath and she's still going strong? You think of someone like Adele or Beyonce or someone of that ilk where they can take a breath and go on forever. And you run out of breath. It's because they're filling their lungs and we're just using a third of our capacity, the top third of our lungs. So if you breathe, and not just breathe for capacity, but breathing also calms nerves. And it supplies more oxygen to your heart, your limbs, and your brain. All things that'll make you not only calmer, but sharper. And that helps as well. So those are two really key things. And the third one, no one wants to hear. Rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. And people go, I know what I'm going to talk about. Yep. Uh-huh. Great. As you can see, which shoulder is it? That shoulder. I'm a huge New York Yankees fan. So even though he's retired, I'll use Derek Jeter because even the Red Sox fans didn't necessarily hate Derek Jeter. So I'll use him as an example. The man was playing baseball since he was 8 years old. One of the greatest ever to play the game. What did he do every day that he was not playing? He practiced. He either took fielding practice, hitting practice, he practiced. They all do. Athletes, professional dancers, heck, even 5-year-old dancers who are going to do a recital for their parents, practice. But for some reason we think, I know what I'm talking about. I don't have to practice. I'm that good. Well, God bless you. Because most of us aren't that good. We have to practice. And practicing, when you're that well rehearsed, your nerves can settle down, and all you have to concentrate on is serving the audience. So rehearsing's key. It's really, really big. Helps a lot.
So what do you say to the person who's like, well, I don't want to sound rehearsed, right? That it just comes off almost like a robotic, I guess you could say. What do you say back to them?
I tell them they haven't rehearsed enough.
There you go.
They think it's going to go the other way. Ooh, you shouldn't rehearse that much then. Odds are you need to rehearse more. And there will be people who argue that, and I get their point, but I'm trying to think of the saying in my head that actors use. And it's you rehearse enough, not so that you get it right. But no, was it? So not so you don't get it wrong, but so you get it right. And that's what you want to do is just rehearse that much that you can be in control. And again, why would anybody want to go up and speak without rehearsing? Would you hand in an article if you were going to be published in a magazine without proofreading it and going over it 5 times or 6 times? No, you wouldn't hand in a first draft. If you were handing in a report to your senior vice president, would you just do it, never check it over, and just hand it in? No. You don't do that. So in other parts of life, we know it doesn't behoove us to hand in a first draft, yet so many of us go in front of 10 people, 50 people, 100 people, whatever it might be, and hand them our first draft. That's not fair to the people listening.
Right.
How important would you say it is to really have a deep, deep understanding of the topic that you're speaking on?
It depends on what qualifies as that. I think you just have to know a little bit more than the person you're speaking to. Right? Because, it's when people say, well, you have to be the expert. Well, the idea of an expert, as far as I'm concerned, is fluid. Because I'm an expert when it comes to public speaking. I got to believe there are people out there who know a heck of a lot more than I'll ever know about it. So that doesn't disqualify me as an expert. They're just more knowledgeable.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody we're helping and serving, we just have to be that much more knowledgeable or capable of helping them than they are.
And I guess really in every area of life, there is going to be, I think it's Ralph Waldo Emerson who said, every man is my superior in something, or I'm probably paraphrasing there, but there is always something that you can teach somebody else and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I think that leads to the imposter syndrome, where people go, "Ooh, what if they find out I don't know every last thing about this? What if they find that out? I can pretty much guess you don't." I don't care who it is standing on stage. I can pretty much assume they don't know every last thing about that subject. And I just go by Einstein. Don't take it from me. Take it from Albert Einstein, who said, "Why remember anything that you can look up in a book?" So, and what I mean by that, sometimes I get asked a question during a Q&A session, and I'll just say to the people, "I'll have to get back to you. Let me be sure of that. Let me look that up. Ooh, I don't know, but I'll get back to you." So sometimes you don't have to know the answer. You just have to know where to find the answer.
There you go.
And in this day and age, that's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Before it was, "I'll get back to you," and you had to send them a letter. Now it's just turn around, look it up on your phone. "I'm getting back to you. Here's the answer." But yeah, I don't think people have to be absolute experts, if there is such a thing.
It's interesting that you mentioned, I think Henry Ford used that same kind of thought process as well. I don't need to know all of this. I've hired people who know this. I think he's famous for making a reference like that. And I'd say even with myself, I remember I used to be really good at remembering directions, remembering how to get places, and I just don't anymore because I have a phone that knows where I'm going.
I used to be incredibly proud that I could remember people's telephone numbers.
Yeah.
All I had to do was use it once, and a month later, I could dial that number. I hadn't dialed it in between those 30 days and go, "Oh, I can remember that." And I used to be so proud of that. You don't need that anymore. It's that's just the way life is. So, and technology provides that help and all, but I just don't think we need to be experts. We just need to be able to help others.
Yeah. And, like your line says, be calm, confident, and credible, right? And people, they'll pick up on all of that. So when you're calm, like you said, you can think, you're breathing better, and confident. People really, they just want to see that you almost look the part. It's one of those fake it till you make it type things, right?
100%.
And you just go in there, and I'm sure there's many of us that can say they've been in a situation where, yeah, you're just going up and you may not want to do it, and you're not feeling the best, but sometimes those end up being the best. Since we're talking about speaking, the best speaking engagements, or people come up after you and are like, "So, oh, thank you so much for sharing that," and all that kind of stuff, where, we're left thinking, "Oh, was that really good? Did I get all my points across?" Right? So yeah, it's interesting how that goes, what people think.
That's a great observation. And it's quite often that way. People want to see that you have confidence, just like you said, Tanya. Mm-hmm. And I tell people, when you go out, stand there with confidence, meaning put your weight in the center. Don't stand on one hip and then 30 seconds later switch the other hip. That's not confident looking. Look confident. And when you look confident, people will start to buy into what you're saying, mm-hmm. because they have confidence in you. People go, "Oh, how can I be confident if I'm nervous?" People don't notice when we're nervous. We think they do. We think they can see our knees shake or our hands shake a little bit, or a little crack in our voice. Well, we can have a crack in our voice anytime.
Yeah.
So, we think people are hearing every little thing and seeing every little thing. Unless you have something in your hand that you're playing with, rolling up paper, clicking and unclicking a pen, that type thing, they won't see the nerves. So when you go out there with confidence, a little bit of a smile if it's appropriate, in most places it is, mm-hmm. then people say, I'm with you till you lose. It's kind of like, I'm yours to lose.
Yeah. So, okay, this is just random, right? Since we started podcasting, the first episode, because I typically am the one who edits, I did not realize I said as many times as I did on that episode. And so now it's like always at the forefront of like, don't say it, because it's just going to take you longer to edit, right? So now, do you have any like, what do you say to the people that you're working with? You know, if they struggle with or I don't know, whatever other things people can struggle with. Do you have any suggestions or tips for us?
I can help you get rid of that in a couple of hours. Okay, and Brian, you're going to have a blast with this. Go to PetSmart or whatever dog store you guys have up in Canada. You have PetSmart and the like.
Yeah.
All right. Go to the dog.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to say.
Go to the dog section. Pick up a dog training clicker. Costs you a whole $2.
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, every time Tanya goes, click it. All right. Actually, Tanya, give it to someone else. He'll have way too much fun with it. So
I was going to say, that sounds like an excellent idea.
He'll start training you to do other things. You know? So, never give it to your significant other. Give it to someone. Just give it to someone else. But that's what we do. And I save that for way down the road when I'm working with someone, because what happens is when you get more effective at speaking and start to use other powers, if you will, a lot of times that starts to subside. So a lot of times we don't even have to deal with that. It goes away on its own. But when it doesn't, I just bring out a clicker and then I give them one and say, bring it home or bring it to your office and give it to someone and practice in front of them. And what happens is that in just an hour or two, not all at once, you can do 15-minute sessions, but maybe in an hour or two worth of time, you start to hear it so much from the clicking, because a lot of times you go, I didn't do it. Yeah, you did. So then just like you, Tanya, you start hearing it before you even say it, which can screw you up on stage because you go, when you hear it and you don't want to say it. But then after a while, you get by that as well. And you catch yourself, but you keep going, and then it's totally eradicated after that. And an here or there doesn't harm anybody. But I'll point to a presentation I was at not too long before COVID started. And it was a so-called expert in his field, which he is actually. 60-minute talk, 317 ums.
Oh boy.
Do the math.
That is painful.
Absolutely painful. And it's not like I go to listen to a presentation, go, I'm going to critique this person. If I did that, I'd drive myself crazy. I want to hear what they have to say. But when someone starts, like every fifth word says,
yeah,
I start ticking off on a piece of paper, just how many there are. Because just out of curiosity, I want to know at the end. And truthfully, I wouldn't be able to listen to what they have to say anyway, because the ums are going to drive me nuts.
Right. And it is a distraction, really, at the end of the day, right? Because it's breaking up your points that you're wanting to share along the way.
It does that, and it does something to the brain as well. Picture this, Tanya. Think, the screeching of a blackboard, right? Okay. Young people don't, but
I do.
Right? So it's like saying, hey, I want you to think of this. And then when you go to think of it, going down the blackboard and then saying, hey, I want you to think of this. And after a while, your brain's going to go, Peter, you're killing me here. Every time I go to think, you interrupted me with this sound. Well, that's what we're doing with ums and uhs and right and and all those things.
All those filler words, yeah.
Yes.
They're killers.
Okay, now for the rest of the conversation. I'm going to be like, I can't say
I'll be going,
Well, the one thing I found worked for me was when I was tempted to say or use a filler word or just not say anything. And then just, because really, when you use a filler word, it only takes up a infinitesimal amount of time. So if you just pause, people don't really notice either.
You nailed it. It's exactly right, Brian. Just pause. And pausing is good throughout a talk. Even when we say people speak quickly, there are a lot of people who speak quickly, but if they pause, it doesn't make that much of a difference. What people need is that opportunity to digest what someone just said. And it's when we don't pause that we think people speak too quickly. It's kind of like hearing a foreign language and you can't delineate where the separations are. So it sounds like one long word that they just keep speaking. So, and we would say, well, it doesn't sound that way in English. Well, to someone that doesn't understand English, it does. It sounds that way in any foreign language. But the thing about pausing as well is that's a great time to pause that you just mentioned. When you're going to say, that's your brain knowing you want to pause. It just doesn't want it to be silent. And just transform it into that silent pause.
Yeah. And, I'm listening to you and your tone and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, man, we should have had Peter on when we were still doing strictly audio, because you would be the easiest podcast to edit. You just speak, and I would let that thing play through and I wouldn't even have to press pause.
It's okay. You needed the practice anyways.
Well, thank you. That's quite a compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. But also it's that speed too, right? Because I think a lot of times people want to just get their point across. I'm one of them. And then it's like, do people catch everything? But I am listening to your speed, even when you talk. And now we're it's not critiquing, but you know what I mean? And it's captivating, but not too fast, not too slow.
No, a lot of people think I speak rather rapidly, maybe other than New Yorkers. But I'm from the Northeast. I'm from New England. So at least in southern New England, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, we speak more quickly than a lot of other areas. But when you put the pause in, people can put up with it. It's not running over them, or as I say, vomiting information on them. And a lot of times you're right. That's what we want to do. I'm so nervous. Or I can see with my clients, I'll put it this way. Quite often my clients and their initial talks, and they're just starting to get better. And they're still a little nervous, and we're videotaping them and all. And they're getting near the end. And they start ramping up. It's like I can see the finish line, and I'm just going to bolt right to it. So
get it all out.
They're at a great pace. They're pausing. They're getting across what they need. And then they can see it. And then they're just like this, and they never inhale again, and they just keep going and going and going and going and going. And done. It's like, let's back up. But that's human nature. Being rehearsed helps you overcome that.
Okay. And so something else, I'm a big, movement person. I like to talk with my hands and all that kind of stuff. Is that okay? Are we allowed to do this?
Yes. Use your hand. Everybody uses their hands. Everybody. Well, think of this, Tanya. When you're on the phone and no one can see you, I will bet you, I will drive to Ontario and buy you dinner if I'm wrong. I will bet you're still moving your hands even though no one can see you.
Mm-hmm.
We all do. Most of us do. We communicate with our hands. We communicated with our hands before spoken language evolved. So that's one of our first forms of communication: facial expressions and hands, body language as a whole. So we still do that today. That's part of our makeup. So yes, use your hands. People read our body language.
Mm-hmm.
They read what our hands are saying. And here's the problem when people have poor body language, or if they stand still and never use their hands. Your body, it's called body language for a reason. Your body is speaking to the people who are listening. The question is it saying nice things about you? Or is it talking behind your back?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, use your hands. I know I don't look it, but I'm Italian. My last name is actually Giosa. So I was brought up in an Italian household, and just like a lot of ethnicities. Oh, if you tied our hands together, we wouldn't be able to talk. Right? Most people say things like that because we use our hands. So why people use their hands all the time and then they get up in front of a group of people and suddenly their hands are stiff as can be? Why that happens, I'm not really sure. But boy, that's pretty much the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new form of a speech impediment, if you will.
Yes, it is. I'm going to use that. I love that. So it absolutely is. People will. I speak to people. I'll speak to clients, and we're having a conversation like this, and their hands are moving, and then you say, "Okay, do your presentation. Camera's rolling. Boom, hands become stiff." Like, what?
So
happened?
interesting.
Yeah, it's a natural thing because we become aware. Once we start speaking like that, we become aware of what our body's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Once we're told to be aware of it, we become aware of it and start to question everything. I have to believe the number one question any public speaking coach in the world gets is, what do I do with my hands? My answer is pretty much what you were doing before you asked the question. And they
Well,
paid
you
me
know
to
what?
give that answer.
Yeah, no, with that, I wonder if people think it makes them look less professional. I don't know. There's my but yeah, I don't know if if that's it, or what, right? But who knows what people are thinking with that? I always use my hands, and I think it also helps to sometimes paint that picture you're trying to explain to people, right? I don't know.
Yeah, how can you, and I'm not one to say every time you say this word, do this. I'm just not one of those people. I don't think
Yeah.
that's right because that looks contrived. That's when people say, number one, it's like the timing's off. No, but how can you miss the opportunity to say it was huge, and hold your hands up? No fisherman who's lying about how big the fish was is keeping his hands in his pocket or her pockets. They're saying it was this big. Why miss that opportunity to connect with your listeners on that extra level? There's a big difference between saying it was this big and it was this big.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing.
No, definitely not. Now, did you ever do any groups like Toastmasters, or did you rely exclusively on Mrs. George pointing out your shortcomings?
I did not do Toastmasters. It's a wonderful organization. There's a reason it's been around for more than 100 years. It's a wonderful organization. I did not do it. I got scared of it. I went to one meeting, got scared, and never went back. And that was me. That was on me. It wasn't on them. It was in Manhattan. And because of my stutter, when I get nervous, the stutter comes back a little bit. The lisp generally doesn't, but the stutter creeps up every now and then. And I happened to walk in. My friend and I were late, and he was a member of it in this Manhattan club. And they were doing when you say they would have a big coffee can and drop pennies in it every time the speaker said I heard that and went, I'm out. I went across the street to the bar while he was at the meeting. I had a much better time at that bar than I would have had in that meeting. And I missed out. I absolutely missed out. I wish I had stayed because I was 24, maybe 25 at the time. And I wish I had done it. Great organization. But no, I never did it. But I went for group and then private training. So that made a little bit of difference, made a lot of difference.
So how did you get to the point where you thought, all right, I'm good at this now. I can teach other people?
I'm not sure there was ever a conscious thought about doing that. What happened was I would try a lot of different things. And sometimes you get to know other speakers. You'd run into them every so often. And sometimes people would say, just like I would to other people, hey, could you tell me how you did that? Or what was your thought behind that? And I started to get that question a lot about different things. And I really enjoyed, I would delay a flight to spend time and say, let's go back up into that room or on stage or whatever, just the two of us, and let's work on that and help you out. And I really, really enjoyed that. And truthfully, I love speaking. I love being on stage. Nervous wreck before I get on, nervous wreck when I'm done, hoping it went as well as I hoped it would. But as much as I love that, I absolutely love helping other people. So I would stop speaking tomorrow if I had to, if that was the only way I could go on coaching others.
Excellent. All right, so Peter, let's talk a little bit about some of the resources that you have. So, you've done some writing as well, not just not just a one-trick pony with the speaking, but you're a writer as well. So,
I'm a writer as well. I've had numerous articles published over the years. I'm writing a book. Actually, my part of writing the book is over. It's at the editor just now. So when she completes what she needs to do and we tie up all the little loose ends at the end, the book will be out. So I'm hoping in about another month, which would be in June of 2022. And so I'm hoping that, and that's called The Captivating Speaker, Captivating Public Speaker. So, and it takes step by step through the system I use.
Okay. And for anybody who wants to learn more, what are the best ways to find you, connect with you? Are you active online? What can you tell us?
I'm active online. LinkedIn is really where I spend most of my time. I'd love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn. And they can always go to petergeorgepublicspeaking.com. They can find out about my training, about the book coming out, my podcast, as much about me as they would want to know, which doesn't have to be a lot, to tell you the truth.
Fair enough. Well, Peter, thank you so much for making the time. We appreciate it. And again, just thank you for sharing your knowledge with all of us.
This has been an absolute blast. I've enjoyed being here. And you guys, a lot of people don't realize it. Being a host, especially on a live stream of a podcast, is extremely difficult. And you guys make it look so easy. Absolutely incredible.
Thank you for that compliment. We'll take it.
Thank you. It took us a year to get up the courage to share the video. So
with those smiles, it would be a shame if people didn't see those big smiles you guys have. So bright
thanks
faces.
so much, Peter.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter. And thank you for taking the time to disrupt your everyday with us.
Thanks for listening to the Disrupt the Everyday podcast. For more ways to listen, connect with us on social media. To be a guest or to partner with us, check out our link tree at Disrupt the Everyday. Join us next time for more ways to disrupt the everyday.